Welcome to What's the Point? A question we should all be asking ourselves, and the podcast by brand architect Bill Ellis.
Hi, and welcome back to What's the Point? Today's discussion is a topic that is somewhat newsworthy today and is relevant, frankly, to all of us. My guest today is Ken Rusk. Ken is a best-selling author. He's an entrepreneur and blue-collar advocate. And what he says is there's no degree required for comfort, peace, and freedom. Ken, good morning. Thank you for being with us today.
Thanks, Phil. I appreciate you having me.
I look very much forward to getting your views on this. And let me start with the title of your book because it's very intriguing, and that's called Blue Collar Cash. I think we all understand the meaning of cash. Let me ask you for your definition of blue collar.
Well, that's an interesting question because when I first wrote the book, I had several working titles, and the publisher just loved that one out of the 4 or 5 that I had. And I think the thing was at the time, in particular with this publisher, she was witnessing in her own neighborhood that all of her friends that were very successful were all blue-collar entrepreneurs. And they had started companies that did something with your hands, whether they were remodelers or builders or plumbers or electricians or carpenters or welders or whatever. And so she really, bemoaned the fact that she's still paying off all these high-end student loans and went to a really high-end school, and all of her, people that are doing things with getting dirty every day are making all the money. So she that was an interesting start to our relationship, if you want, Bill. But blue collar really, the real true sense of it is back in the day, if you were a learned person, if you were a college graduate, if you were a professional person, like an accountant or lawyer or doctor or whatever, you would literally walk around town with one of those really thick white plastic collars that you would put on your suits, and you would have what be known as a white collar person. Whereas a blue collar person typically wore jeans or what they called dungarees back then, or Levi's, and you had a blue shirt on, and this shirt had a blue collar.
Yeah.
So that's the real sense of how that came. But for me, it's anyone that literally gets up and relies upon themselves or a small group of others to physically make something happen every day that puts their world together for them.
Good, great answer. And the reason I ask that is, depending on who you speak to, and I'm sure you have heard this more than I, the term blue collar might have negative connotation. And I happen to be fortunate to have just a lot of quote unquote blue collar friends, both individual contributors and people that have blue collar business, blue collar entrepreneurs. And in my experience, it might be a better term to use as skilled workers. What are your thoughts on that, and how does that come into play when you're speaking to people about the potential of your book title, Blue Collar Cash?
Well, first off, I think a lot of that is caused by higher education. You have these cabals of higher education that literally will say to parents, if your kid doesn't come through one of our systems, he or she's going to flip burgers the rest of their life. That is so disingenuous, and it is so misleading. And they point to a study that says, if you have higher education, you are going to make more money than people that don't. And the problem with that study that they all point to is the fact that when you go to the blue-collar side, they lump every blue-collar job or every part-time job in the world into that side of the study, including babysitting, paper routes, and all that kind of stuff, lawn mowing when you were 12 years old. So yeah, if you lump all those part-time or lower-paying jobs or first-time jobs into that research segment, if you will, it's going to be lower. But to your point, if you pull out the skilled worker section and put that against white collar, it's not only the opposite. It's unbelievable how much money is being made in these segments, because these are things that you have to know how to do. You don't just sling a bag of newspapers over your shoulder, jump on your banana bike, and ride down the street. These are things that you have to really learn how to create something, how to create a result, how to build the building that's going to stand up when the wind blows. I mean, this is not just something to be put idly by like, oh, that's just a blue-collar guy swinging a hammer. It's not the way it works anymore.
Well, I'm laughing partly because you've had a couple of references so far that some of the younger listeners in the audience might not know. Dungarees was one, and if you don't know what a banana bike is, Google it, because they gave me a very clear picture, and I appreciate that. Ken,
Yes, sir.
regardless of blue collar, white collar, whatever pursuit, taking all the labels aside, one of the starting premises of your work, I agree with 1,000%, and it's my work as well. And that is, you say, start by asking, where do you want to go in life? And the title of the show here, what's the point? Simon Sinek calls it, what's your why? Expand on that so not only the question of where do you want to go with life, but how do you and how does your process help people get that insight?
Well, first off, I really wish this stuff was taught in school, but it's not. What we teach in school instead is to react to things. We teach to the quiz. We teach to the test. We teach to the result. And there's so many things that we react to. It's cold outside, we put a jacket on. The news says something, so we form an opinion. Your friends say something, so you need to react to that. You're hungry, so you need to make food. Whatever, we spend a lot of our time reacting as humans to try to live, when in fact, the biggest gift that we've been given is the ability to proact, the ability to visualize, the ability to dream, to wish, to hope, and then turn those dreams, wishes, and hopes into actual physical time pathways, which is what we call mirror at our company. So we're also good at one thing. I know that every one of us is good at planning a vacation, right? And we think, okay, it's December. I'm going to go to Florida in April. I'm going to put my feet in the sand. I'm going to watch the palm trees sway. I'm going to feel the heat on my face. I'm going to smell the Copper Tone No. 8 suntan lotion on my body. I'm going to have the margarita. I'm going to be listening to Pearl Jam. I'm going to have my beach towel. I mean, the whole thing, we can feel it. We can taste it. We can sense it. Okay. And we plan for that 4 months ahead. And we do it by visualizing. It's the only way you could do it. You have to visualize what you want in a vacation and then plan for it. And I'm saying, if we're so good at that, Bill, why are we not good at planning for every aspect of our life? Our next car, our next house, our next vacation, our health, our hobbies, our sports, our children, our pets, dog or cat, what color, what would you name it? Why are we not planning for all those eventualities, just like we do a vacation? And I think, for me, I try to just put a real simple plug-and-play method of teaching you how to think the opposite way of how you've been thinking, which is, where am I going? What does it look like? And how can I get there?
Yeah, and I might add, and perhaps this is part of your approach, and I'm going to ask you for more detail in just a moment. Why am I not there? Or what's holding me back? So you talk about there's no degree required for comfort, peace, and freedom, and position those as goals worth pursuing. Those listening today or listening whenever that feel that they're stressed and struggling financially, strapped, feeling trapped in where they are, what do you want them to know? And what's the first step for them to take to realize that they can start to get a hold of those goals?
Well, the first thing I would say is, I mean, if I walked up to any one of your listeners on the street, I guarantee you I couldn't pick their favorite color. I couldn't pick their favorite car, their favorite anything. I couldn't pick the favorite way they'd want to live. See, we all have this thing called our own perfect nirvana that we dream about, okay? Some people, it's, I want to be a rap star. Some people, I'm going to be an influencer. Some people, I'm going to own 15 cars and a McMansion and a big yacht. Other people are like, you know what? If I could have a paid-off ranch house out in the country somewhere, and I could have my pickup truck, and I could have, maybe a couple acres of land, I want to live, that would be perfect. If I could just live like that. Well, that's my whole premise, is you control those thoughts. You control your input of those thoughts, and therefore you control the output of those thoughts, good or bad. You control the quality of that thought. You probably can control your day, your time, and your schedule, and your financial gain based on how powerful those thoughts are. So the first thing I would say is recognize that you and only you care most about what the rest of your life looks like. Nobody else does. I mean, they may say they do, and they might be, maybe a family member or whatever. But the only person that really cares about who you end up being is you. So while that's a responsibility, it's also a gift. And we don't use that side of our brain. In the research for Blue Collar Cash, we figured that most people don't use more than 40% of the brain power that they have. And it's because they boil their life down to simple reactions. Well, if you think of having another 60% of computing power in your brain, which we all have, we can all visualize, why aren't we unleashing that power, which unleashes another 2 or 3 human beings worth of motivation? Why aren't we unleashing that, using that to drive what we do every day? When you get out of bed and your feet hit the floor, you already have many destinations in mind, whether it's the bathroom or church or school or the mall or whatever. You have these destinations in mind. You're practicing this craft already. You just need to get better at it, expand upon it, dream a little more, and then set the pathways towards those dreams.
So you have coached hundreds, if not thousands, of people in this approach. Can you share a real world example, without identifying an individual, but a real world example of someone that you've helped to make a major change? Maybe someone that had doubts that they could ever have the comfort, peace, and freedom that you talk about. Walk us through a real world example of how that has happened.
Well, I'll tell you two, one that I know of and one that I'd never met.
Okay.
So the never met one's quick. This was a guy who read my book and he said, Ken, I am that guy. He said, I was a plumber's assistant through college, loved working with people, loved being outside, loved creating work and getting jobs done. And then I studied, medical sales, okay? And now I'm in the 15th floor in this cubicle and I'm selling medical sales that I don't care about. I don't know who my patients are. I don't know where I even fit in this world, okay? I'm part of this huge conglomeration. I don't know, where I'm at. And I never really wanted to do it. My parents said I had to go to college. I had to pick a degree, so I picked whatever was there. And I'm miserable. So he left that job and he went back after reading the book and taking the course. He went back to become a plumber. He's never been happier. I mean, he's 46 years old. He's out there plumbing and he's never been happier. So that's a person I never met. The one I think is the most powerful would probably be the story that got me doing this to begin with. And that is in the book. His name is Tim. He started out as a ditch digger like I did, right alongside me. And now he's the vice president of our companies. And he had a moment in time when he was 19 where he was like, my wife's having some medical issues with a birth of our child, and we're back on all these medical bills, and I don't want to file bankruptcy. I think I have to leave your company and go work at the factory my dad does because there's more dollars per hour there, but I hate the factory. I don't want. And he was lost. So we just sat down with a big piece of paper and a bunch of markers, and we drew out a picture of what his life could look like, the way he wanted it, down to the most intense detail. And then we started knocking those things down one at a time. The very first one was paying off his $8,000 in medical debt. We did that. And then he wanted to buy a new pickup truck. We went and bought him a black GMC pickup truck, just how he wanted a year or two later. Then he wanted a piece of land, and he found a farmer that, like I did, would sell him a piece of land on land contract, paid that off over 3 or 4 years. And then he built a house. Now he's got 4 sons. He's got a second or third house, and he's doing amazing. But it was all because he started with, what do I want it to look like? Instead of waiting for, well, if I ever get lucky and some money falls in my lap, then I can start living my life. That's not the way to do it. You and I both know, Bill, that life is either going to happen to you or you're going to happen to life. And I choose the latter versus the former.
Great examples, both. And speaking of your choice, you started at 15, if not younger, doing ditch digging and other construction work. You never went to college. What was your vision? Did you have a vision? What was your moment of clarity, I'll call it, that made you realize that college wasn't for you, and that pursuing the blue collar field was? And as part of that, did you envision staying in that, I'll call it industry or in that segment, as a worker, or did you envision what you've done, which is to create a company and take advantage of that?
The very first time, and so I had four brothers and my mom and dad, and we lived in a very small house in Amherst, Ohio. And my father was making $14,000 a year chopping lettuce at a produce department at a Kroger's, which he eventually ran. But the interesting thing was, he was honest with us. He said, "Look, I can keep you clothed, I can keep you fed, I can keep you in some basic fun. If you need more than that, then you got to go out and find a way to do it." And so I'll never forget this, Bill. I wanted an aluminum baseball bat. I was a baseball player. I was 12 years old, and they were just coming out on the market, aluminum baseball bats. So I figured out that I could trade 20 hours of labor for that bat. I could go mow lawns at $2 an hour, and 20 hours later, I'd have that bat in my hand. I thought that was the coolest thing in the world. I thought that was the greatest math that ever happened. So what happened from there is the things got more expensive, the hours got longer, the hours got more worthwhile. You know what I mean? And I started the landscaping company and had a couple guys that worked with me, and I couldn't believe that I could be on one job making money, and I also was making money on those guys at another job at another time. And so it just kept going from there. And what I realized was I never wanted to not be in control of my ability to create things for myself. So that's where college wasn't for me. I wasn't going to go for 4 years and pay someone, $80,000 and then have to borrow that money and then pay it back, and maybe in 10 years could start to live my life. That just wasn't for me. I wanted to control everything. And I knew that I could based on the 12-year-old baseball bat story. So that, to me, whether you're blue collar, white collar, doesn't matter. You always have to be anticipating a thing or a series of things that keep you growing in whatever business you're in, keep you more aware of your opportunities, keep you aware of the power that you have to grow above and beyond those things. And to build a life that you really see for yourself one step at a time. It's just a wonderful way to live.
It is, and we are so firmly in sync on the key being understanding ourselves and where we want to go and what we want to do. It's part of the reason I do this show, Ken, to be honest, is through stories of others. It's my hope that people will either discover, embrace, or leverage, or build, or evolve their purpose by getting an aha moment, what I call an aha moment. And your story and a lot of the examples that you can bring certainly present that opportunity. So let me ask you this. What is maybe the funniest or the most memorable light bulb moment or aha moment that you've witnessed in your career and all of the work you've done?
That is a really great question. In 320 podcasts, I haven't been asked that yet. So congratulations. That's a great question. So we have this very, I don't want to say aggressive, but this very motivating type of attitude around our office. I've got a big black board out there that's about 8 feet by 8 feet tall. It's made of glass, and it has a bunch of little goals written on it. And then when I say goals, I mean timed pathways. What I want, how much it's going to cost, how much I'm going to save every week. The payroll department already knows about it. I've got the account set up. I'm starting here. I'm finishing there. We sign it. And then everybody kind of high fives each other. There's 50 goals on that board at any one time, and they're all live. And so we have this real attitude towards we're going to go kick butt and we're going to make things happen for ourselves. Here we go. Well, I had this new hire. Her name's Kiara, and she walked down the hallway, and we were really big into not someday, today. So forget about someday. Someday never comes. That's a bad word in our company. Don't even use it. Today. So she walked down the hallway one day when I was coaching someone else, and she looked at that board and she goes, "It's really cool that you do that for your employees. Someday I'm going to get up on that board." The guy, you should have seen the face on the guy who was coaching, because he was like, "You did not just say Sunday. You did not just say Sunday." So I stopped my coaching with him and I said, okay, young lady, here's what's going to happen. This is Friday. On Monday, you're going to have a goal. On Monday. So go home and think about it. We're coming back and we're going to make this happen. Well, she came back on Monday and she said, I always wanted to pay off my father for a used car that he bought me a few years back, and I felt bad that I never paid him back for that. And I said, how much was it? She said, $2,500. I said, well, can you save $48 a week? And she said, yeah. And I said, okay, you'll have him paid off in a year. She looked at me like I invented penicillin. I mean, it was like, it's that simple. And I'm like, yeah, it's that simple. And 6 months later, she was 6 months done. And 9 months later, she was 3 months away. And I got to tell you, man, when she hit that goal, she was like just this warm, beautiful, caring, growing human being. And since then, she bought a house. She's bought 2 new cars. She's gotten married. She's had a couple of kids. Unbelievable story. All from the fact that she blew it and said, someday I'm going to get up on that.
Well, that's a tribute to your process, but it's also a tribute to your coaching and the fact that you're opening up that she was in the general area and that your client is the one that said, are you kidding? You didn't really say that. That's so people having goals. There's a difference between a goal, a stretch goal, and something totally, completely unreasonable. Like it would be an unreasonable goal if right now in my life I said, I'm going to run a marathon next Friday.
Sure.
It's just not going to happen. So when you have been working with people, what is like the wildest, most outlandish vision that either was completely unattainable that you have to reel someone back on, or that you went, wow, that's really pushing it. Let's figure that one out. Something a little bit more involved than your wonderful math to Kira, $48 a week.
Well, I think what happens is it's almost like when it'd almost be like you telling a 2-year-old to put their boots on and lace them up, and you forgot to tell them, okay, well, you got to put your pants on, and then you got to put your socks on, and then you put your boots on. So there's parts that are missing. So when someone comes up to me and they say, they're 19 years old and they say, I want to build a 5,000 square foot house. I love the goal, but there's a lot of parts in between that need to happen. So that's the kind of thing that I will dial back. All right, well, let's talk about the pathway to that. So building a house in today's dollars is X amount of money, and you need X amount to put down, and you need. So I will then talk about, let's take that goal, which is important, and I love it. Let's turn it into a when goal, not an if goal, because if it's something you think you're going to do now, that's not going to happen, and I don't want you to be out there pounding your head against the wall and saying, "Man, it's just not happening for me." So anything can be a when goal, and I'll give you an example. We would go on these golf trips, my buddies and I, every year, northern Michigan, whatever, close by Ohio. One day I said, let's go to the home of golf. Let's go to Scotland and play golf at the old course, St. Andrews. And they looked at me like, man, I can't afford that. And I said, you can. It's just when. So we put that goal out 5 years. And when we figured it out, we needed to save like $20 a week in order to make that happen. So all of a sudden I had 16 guys like, I can do that. So we went from everyone going, no way, I can't afford to go to Scotland, to, well, wait a minute, maybe I can do that. And we anticipated that trip for 5 long years. Some of the guys started putting money on their credit card to get traveler points so they could upgrade to first class and sit upstairs on the 747. I mean, it was crazy. We did all these wonderful things on $20 a week. But you know what we did, Bill? It was for sure going to happen. It may take a while, but it was for sure going to happen. So that's the thing I talk about with people that I have to dial their goals back. I say, let's make them certain instead of maybe, but let's just push it out to a point where you could actually make that happen.
That's brilliant and a great example too. And I hope you enjoyed golfing in Scotland. So what I'm taking from your comment is there's not really any goal that's too outlandish once you gain a more realistic or more palpable perspective on it. So me running a marathon next Friday is just absolutely insane. Me running a marathon at all is arguably doable. Uh, but in your example, it's a matter of here's where you want to end up. Take the time limit off of that. Let's look at what it takes to get from where you are to that point, and let's break it down into steps. And how many steps can you take, and how long will it take you to get them, and can you accomplish that? Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, another way to look at it is something that everyone's done in their lifetime, and that is a puzzle, okay? So if I took 1,000-piece puzzle and dumped it on your desk right now and said, put this together, okay, you'd probably get the edges, but if I took the box away, which is the most important thing you have, you'd be struggling to put that puzzle together. It'd take you a very long time. And the reason that is because what most people don't realize is when you put a 1,000-piece puzzle together, you look at that box between 50 and 100,000 times, which means you have a piece and you're looking up, looking up, looking up, looking up. Each piece is at least 10, 15, 20 looks at the box. So if you don't have the box, you're kind of messed up. You're kind of screwed from the beginning. And I think that's the same way with the marathon. You would have to decide what that marathon was going to entail in every single concise, colorful detail. And then you'd have to work back from then to now and say, well, can I get myself ready to do something like that, one piece at a time? Maybe you run, a half a mile for a couple of weeks, and then you run a mile and a half for a couple of weeks. Who knows? But you're going to have to know exactly what that feels like medically, physically, mentally right now, and then say, can I get to that place? Just like you do with puzzles. If you don't have that box, you're not going to run 24 and a half miles or whatever.
26.2. I know the distance, but I also know I'm not making it if I'm not in my car. It's funny you mentioned the puzzle in the box because that's so true. We have a business called the Puzzle Warehouse here in St. Louis, and they literally have thousands of puzzles in stock on their shelves. One of which, when I was in there shopping for something for my wife, was, I think it was a 500-piece, it may have been more, puzzle that was all one color. It was all white. So look at the box all you want, but that is puzzle. That is puzzle working at a level that I don't have the patience for.
That might be the definition of insanity right there. I mean, wow.
Speaking of insanity, let's jump back here a little bit. What's the worst advice you've ever received?
No doubt. You're the boss. You need to be in control of it all. Okay. I can tell you that all the entrepreneurs that I meet, I've learned this. This is 100% true. Okay. So you got this entrepreneur and he's on Friday, he or she is pounding their chest and they're going home and they're saying, hey, honey, man, I did everything. I did this. I fixed that. I repaired this. I motivated these people. I screamed at that guy. I built this. I set that up. I also have high blood pressure and diabetes. I can't remember my kid's first name and what sport they're in. But I'm making money, baby, and it's awesome, right? I'm pissing everybody off at my company. I'm going through people like a revolving door, but I'm making money. That is the worst definition of an entrepreneur you could ever assign to it. So my advice is so the opposite that it makes people queasy when I say it. I think if you're an entrepreneur, you need to start right now by making yourself as irrelevant to your company as possible. And I mean that in irrelevant to the daily mechanics of it. Because if you're truly going to be a driven visionary, okay, or driver, you need to be up 10,000 feet above your company looking 2-3 miles out to see where the pitfalls are, where the opportunities are, where the awarenesses can be. And you can't do that if you're in the trenches working really, really hard. So that and also the fact that if you can employ the entrepreneurial spirit in your company, where people run their own divisions like they would run it themselves, even though you own it, and then they share in the benefit of those divisions well run, you're going to find power and synergy and momentum that you never knew existed. The more entrepreneurs you have, the more your company grows, and it's going to grow way further and way faster than you can do it yourself, I guarantee.
So that's a good example of working on your business as opposed to working in your business. Now I'm going to flip it on you a little bit, Ken. What is the worst advice you've ever given someone?
Oh, that's another easy one. We turned down a 401k company for 3 or 4 years before we said yes. And when I learned the power of 401ks for people that are younger, I mean, how about this little mini statistic that most people don't know? So if you're 21, by the time you retire, let's call that 63, that's 42 years. Well, if your money doubles every 7 years, you have 6 sessions of 7 doubles. Okay. If you wait till you're 28 to start your first savings, you're missing the very first double, which is the most important double at the end, where your money goes from 500,000 to $1 million in 7 years. Yeah, that was my worst advice. I put off the 401k company for a few years until we finally said yes. And now we have a thing called the 401k Millionaire Club here, where 19, 20-year-olds, 21, 22-year-olds, they're saving $40, $50 a week, and we're matching a quarter of that. So for every dollar they save, they get $1.25 every Friday. It's insane how fast that money adds up. It's insane how you don't even need to save your whole life to build an amazing retirement. And now we have these guys walking around with statements that say they're going to have $1, $2, $3 million in their account when they're 65. And it's just awesome. So my worst advice I ever gave was to not start that soon.
Okay. Well, it sounds like there's a 401k company out there that could probably give you a good fee for endorsing and supporting their product.
No doubt. No doubt.
There's a lot of talk and subject in your work about quote unquote young people. Let me ask you this, Ken. What about the more mature, older person, rather than the 19-year-old? What about the 35-year-old? What about at what age does it not make sense anymore to consider a change, whether it to be to the blue collar or not? In my coaching, I talk a lot about people that are on the ladder of success and suddenly realize that their ladder's on the wrong building. It's like, what am I doing here? And sometimes that happens quickly, and sometimes it happens slowly. But it's not always at 19. We don't always have that clarity that young.
Right.
Talk to me about the older person, because there are a few older folks listening right now.
Well, I would say this. So when I started my company, I started it literally with graph paper and pencils, okay, and an adding machine, right? There was no computers, there was no cell phones, none of that. Now I see these guys running around our planet with pickup trucks, a cell phone, and they're running entire companies out of the cab of their truck. So all I can say is, with the advent of the internet and the internet marketplace, it has never been easier to turn a side gig into a full gig. And I'll only speak to the people that I know. I know guys that were building river edge tables, the epoxy tables that are just beautiful. They're made out of a piece of wood with epoxy laid out in them. I know people that build furniture. I know people that were building outdoor kitchens on the side on the weekends. People that were doing flower arrangements on the weekends, people that were catering and that kind of thing. And because of the fact that you can open a business now with a cell phone where you can do payroll, accounting, ordering, inventory, everything, it's never been easier to run your own company. It just never has, okay? If you pair that up with the fact that supply and demand is showing us right now that most of the electricians, the carpenters, the plumbers are 45, 50, 55, 60 years old, and they're retiring with only a third of the people coming in to follow to replace them. There is so much opportunity, so much demand, and that's where the money's going right now. Where supply is low and demand is high, that's where the money goes. That's Econ 101. So all I can tell you is, if you have a business out there that you think you would be good at, turn it into a side gig and very quickly turn it into a full-time gig, because it's so easy to run your own company now versus how it was, 20, 30 years ago. I don't care who you are. You can start. I know people that have said, you know what, enough of this corporate world, and they've gone out and done things at 45, 50 years of age, and they're just happy that they did it. They didn't realize that the barriers weren't as large as they thought they were, right? So yeah, side gig into a full gig is a pretty fun thing to watch.
That's an essential, critical statement that you made, Ken, that the barriers weren't as large. And that's where I'm going to jump back to one of your earlier analogies about telling a child to put on your boots and strap them up and head out there. Yeah, it's fine to say, get a side gig, figure out what you're good at. There's also the need to follow the process that you've already talked about. How do you envision it? What are the barriers? What are the opportunities? How do you get there? Because in my experience, there's a lot of people that say, boy, this would be a great way to make money. And they go and they jump into it. I've got a friend who has sold soap that he's made at home and spent more money on material. And just every time I talk to him, he's got another gig going, which is fine. I love his initiative. I love his self-confidence, but he's missing an important part there. And that's what your approach brings. Share with us how your approach might help someone get into that second stream of income, that side gig / becoming a full gig.
Well, I mean, the process, first off, to me anyway, is why are you doing it? I think even what's the point? Like your podcast is called. You have to start with something that's very strong, because that will help you to overcome, it's my belief, and this might not be real. I have no studies to back me up on this, but if you think about entrepreneurial spirit being things like initiative, persistence, resilience, faith, courage, vision, generosity, simplicity, there's a lot of those characteristics that I believe that we all have. We just need a reason for them to come out. And so, that's why you see some of these folks, wow, this housewife, she was thinking about this, and all of a sudden she built this company out of it because she had a reason why, okay? A very strong reason why. So I think the first thing is you need to identify why it is that you want to do any of these things. And if that why is strong enough, it'll overcome a lot of the barriers that you have. To your point, though, there is a method to this. And I wouldn't necessarily have someone just jump right out into running their own outdoor kitchen building company. But I would say this, there are hundreds of business owners just like that who are 55, 60, 65 years old, making $200,000-300,000 more a year, that are retiring, who have no one to give these companies to. So if you're a person that thinks, you know what, that could be something I'd like to do, go to work for one of these people for 2, 3, 4 years, watch them do what they do, either buy them out or start your own company once you're comfortable with the processes of how that thing runs. Because you're right, there's some hidden things that people don't know about. Oh, workers' comp, what's that all about, right? So, yeah. So I look at it this way. You could go right now to your local Home Depot or your Lowe's or, Menards, any one of those kind of big box stores. Go to the desk where all of the contractors go and they order their stuff. They have a special area for them. Ask them, what's missing in this town? What do we not have? What do the guys got that they're ready to retire on that are going to be going away soon? They will tell you what the needs are of your community. Believe me, they know more than anybody does because they serve these people every single day, right? You could go there and with a good 20-minute conversation, you could walk out with 3 ideas. Hey, there's no one to supply lumber in this town, or there's no one that's doing painting in this town, or there's no one that's doing this in this town anymore because the guy's all retired or left or whatever. They will tell you where to go. They'll give you a supply and demand lesson in 20 minutes. That can help guide you, at least get you started as to where you could go out, and even if you're mediocre, you're still going to survive in it because of the demand until you get good at it. So there's 2 ways to do this. I would mentee off of somebody, for sure. Either buy their company or start your own. And I would also gather the advice of what the community is saying to you. What are they crying out for that isn't there? And I guess my third piece of advice would be, Don't always worry about the end product. Okay. Ditch digging was number 99 out of a list of 100 things that I wanted to do, but I knew that I could control all those things. I could create wealth for myself and live the way I wanted to live, and then eventually invest in other things that I was a little more passionate about. I believe that when you run a company full of individuals that performs a task, you could almost interchange the task at the end because the infrastructure of what you have would work. Like I could take ditch digging right now and switch it to Windows tomorrow with the same infrastructure of people. And it's because it's the people and the process that makes that work. I know I've said a lot there, but I think those are 3 things that you should really consider before you go jumping into anything.
Well, I think there are 3 very important things, and I appreciate you sharing them. To boil it down, I think two points that I'll share that I've taken from what you said, which is number 1, don't dismiss your big idea because you don't think it can happen. Take the time to do some work. But the second thing is exactly that. Do the work. Do some exploration. Find not just can you find what's missing in your community by going to a big box store. They probably know someone, Joe, Sally, Harry, John, that are just like, I need help, or I can't find help, or any number of things where they that holds true to a bunch of other business sources as well. I don't want to ask you what number 100 on your list was, so we'll leave that there. Whatever was behind ditch digging will remain your secret. But I do want to shift quickly to your book, Blue Collar Cash. You mentioned that your publisher chose that title out of several. And I do know that in a very, very unusual situation, several publishers were bidding for the rights to publish that book, which is the antithesis of what most authors face. So I want to talk about that a little bit and get your insight, but also what I think is as important as anything is part of what makes Ken is your willingness and interest in helping others. So you've got a best-selling book, you've got another one in the works, and all of the proceeds from that don't go into Ken Rusk's pockets. They go to a foundation you started called the Comfort, Peace, Freedom Foundation. Just as succinctly as you can, talk about the book and where the proceeds go and that whole aspect of your learning in your life.
Well, in my mind, whenever you're blessed and you've been successful and you're fortunate, you're humble, you're grateful. I'm grateful every day. Every morning I practice being grateful. The first thing I think of is, how can I help somebody else live the life that I've lived? How can I help someone else shorten their learning curve? So everything that I do, from these types of educational products that I have at kenrusk.com, I do donate that money because, I donate to first responders. I donate to sons and daughters of the fallen, Gold Star families, that kind of thing, because I want to try to give people, a shot, a little bit of a help getting to where they want to go. So yeah, that's called the Comfort, Peace, and Freedom Foundation. You can find it at veteransuccess.org. And to me, when it comes to veterans in specific, it drives me crazy when we send someone off to battle, and then when they come back, they have to think to themselves, well, I was driving a tank yesterday, and now today I'm wondering, what am I going to do with my life? That to me was a disconnect. And that's what causes depression, anxiety, frustration, even suicide. So I got to stop. I got to help put a dent in some of that. So for me, I wanted people to realize that, okay, if you're going to be a carpenter or a plumber or an electrician, know that before you go into the service, so that while you're there doing your thing, serving your country, you can be thinking about your eventuality. And when you get out, you will then make that eventuality a real thing. Why wait till that moment to go, well, now what am I going to do? So I try to educate people into thinking about what their life could look like before the service, during the service, and then after. I think that would help people end the confusion, the frustration, hopefully get them not thinking about, the worst outcome that could be, and maybe live a little more balanced life. And that's why I did it. The book itself just came from a long letter that I wrote to my daughter, who was suffering from cancer when she was 12 years old. And, when you're in doctor's offices and oncology offices and radiology rooms, it's a depressing place to be. You have a lot of time to think. So I just kept writing letters to her about what do I think life is all about? What should she be chasing? What should she be anticipating? And comfort, peace, and freedom were the words that came from that. So after writing her letters and then writing stories about my friends who overcame horrible circumstances to be successful people, I just had 80,000 words, and all of a sudden it was a book. And somehow it got picked up by an agent and then an editor. And then there was, like you said, there was a little auction between different publishing houses that were demanding the book. And it was just amazing. I still to this day, I don't know how it happened, but again, very blessed and grateful for that.
Starting every day on a basis of gratitude is essential. I have heard often and now say often, gratitude is the gateway to happiness. So if you're looking for happiness, start with gratitude. A couple more things. We're going to run a little bit longer than I typically ask guests. I appreciate your time, and I trust you're okay with going another few minutes.
Sure.
Is there a piece of blue-collar wisdom, quote unquote, blue-collar wisdom that you struggle to follow in your own life?
Yeah, it's one of those things where I challenge myself because I have hit a lot of the milestones I wanted to hit, So I sometimes challenge myself, well, what's the next thing? What am I chasing personally? So I have to always be reinventing something that I want to anticipate. And so when it comes to the grit of, do it yourself, get up out of bed and go make that happen, build something, fix something, repair something. I still have that mentality, but I've had a lot of good success in life. I love giving back a lot now because that satisfies a lot of that need. But sometimes I even need to remind myself, hey, go find something to chase, make it to relight that fire.
Great. Giving back, the Blue Collar Cash and the program that supports it, all of that information can be found at kenrusk.com, KENRUSK. And that's all in the show notes, as it always is. Ken, we started by talking about people figuring out where they want to go, what they want their life to look like. So let me get one of the final questions to this point. Complete this sentence in the best Ken Rusk way possible.
Okay.
You found your calling when
People would talk about you in a way that you want them to talk about you. You found your calling when people would say, that guy Ken, he was always a generous guy. He was always a helpful guy. He cared about as much about his employee success as he did about his own. And that speaks volumes about him. So I think that would be the best way to answer that.
Great answer, and I appreciate that. And now the final question, which if you've listened to the show, is the final question on every episode, and you can answer this in whichever perspective you choose to answer it. But the show is all about what's the point. So from Ken Rusk, what's the point?
Well, yeah, that's a great one. What's the point? I have a little frame in my first floor. I have a pub in my first floor off the side of my house, and that's where I make my protein shakes in the morning and take all my supplements and do all that stuff. And the frame rotates, and it has hundreds of pictures of family, friends, things I've done, places I've been. And I look at that frame, and I get to start off the morning remembering things, being grateful, smiling, laughing sometimes, many times. And I just think, like you said a minute ago, find a way that forces you to be grateful every single morning. This does that. And it just makes me start off every day going, wow, that's pretty cool. What's next?
Well, Ken, that's a great answer and a great way to end the episode. Again, thank you for your time. Thank you for everything you do to give back and help others. Thank you for your insights. I appreciate it, Ken, and I look forward to getting to know you even better.
Happy to be here, Bill. Thanks a lot for having me.
Thanks for tuning in. And if you like what you've heard, please subscribe so you don't miss an episode. We can promise there is value to be gained in every one. Taking a second to rate, review, and share the show helps make us more discoverable and enables others to find out what's the point. If you'd like to learn more about Bill Ellis and his services, please visit his website, billellis.com. See you next time.